Hello and welcome to a special episode of Plat Chat Overwatch. And we brought Custa in for one reason, and that is because we've ran out of news to talk about. So we decided to bring Custa in, and we're going to review some of his old gameplay from 2018. First week of 2018, the inaugural season of the Overwatch League. Some of you guys watching the Plat Chat podcast probably weren't even watching the Overwatch League back then. You actually don't know what it was like. So this is going to be an interesting look at some history for you. And what better person to bring on than Custa himself to explain some of the gameplay, because he was playing on the Dallas Fuel at the time. And that's the game we're going to be looking at. The Dallas Fuel versus the Seoul Dynasty, day one, week one. I think it was the last match of the day, wasn't it?
I think it was the last match of the day, yeah. And there have been two 4-0 rolls before that. So Monty and Doa are on the mic, and I think they start by saying something like, oh, we've only had rolls up till now, so I hope this is going to be a good game. Everyone thought this, like all of the comments in the Overwatch thread are all like, wow, grand finals preview, day one. That's crazy. So good.
So much PTSD came flowing through me when you guys asked me to do this, because these are the kind of things that are like, well, honestly, the entire Dallas Fuel era, I just sort of put in the back of my mind because it was kind of a shit show. But this was like the beginning of the descent, because up until this point, right, everyone was like, as you said, this was going to be the grand finals matchup. Everyone had like Dallas Fuel either 1 or 2 or Seoul Dynasty 1 or 2. That was where it was going back and forth. But like this game, like going into it as a player, because obviously we've been screaming up here, we knew where we stood in the game, and this was like terrifying. This was the most terrifying thing as a player and as a team coming to this match, because there was so much hype, and if we lost this game, then it all came tumbling down.
I mean, in many ways, it was like the big clash between two teams that we didn't get to play that much, because before the Overwatch League, you had Envy, who won North American Contenders, right? And it was like this big, the best Western team, and then they had made signings with AKM and Anko from Rogue, and then they brought in xQc and Custa, of course. Like, so this was like the big Western juggernaut. And then on the other side, you had Seoul Dynasty, which was like the Korean team. Obviously, there were like LW Blue at the time, there were Kongdu teams, C9 got in the mix, but Seoul Dynasty was like really high. They were, the big fan favorite, the big team. Korean juggernaut, like the team, So this was supposed to be the clash between the number 1 and number 2 seed of the Overwatch League. And well, there was this history, but people were hyped going into this matchup.
I'm hyped to rewatch it, man. I'm hyped to rewatch it.
That makes one of us.
We've set the scene. We've set the scene. The context is here. We can get started. The way this has worked, because Custa's computer is currently on fire, we have to sync it up. So I'm just going to... You want to just pull it up, and I'll say
I'm ready whenever you are.
2, 1, and then we'll play it, okay?
Okay.
But that was that...
Yeah, was that not it? I thought that was it for a second.
That was not it.
Are we doing it on 1?
Oh, we'll do it on 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we're doing it on 1. Okay.
We'll do it on 1.
Clearing things up.
Okay. Are you back up to the timestamp that you were on before?
I'm ready. I'm at 10:30. We're ready.
Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Why would we go on 1? But that worked. Okay, sure.
I don't know why you're on 1. Usually I go on go. Yeah,
it's fine. Yeah, we make it work.
Yeah. For anyone who's watching this at home as well, this was Monty and Doa casting. So I mean, this is truly like, it's still really early Overwatch in my head. When you watch the gameplay as well, you'll be able to see that it looks like early Overwatch too. But like
Custa on Zen, early Overwatch, really early Overwatch.
And then we've got just like so many old school
logistically?
players.
But can we pull the AMs down? Is that possible, Kurt? So that we can
Time
see
on
the
Moira.
heroes?
There you go.
Oh my god. Yeah.
On that quick note, before we talk about the roster as well, because there we go.
Perfect.
There it is. Because you mentioned Monty and Doa casting as well. And before the Overwatch League, I believe they didn't cast as well, because they were working with us on Contenders, remember? So they didn't actually cast matches. I don't know if they did like the North American finals.
They did Apex. I mean,
they did Apex, but then they took a break, right?
Right,
to work on the Overwatch League, right? And they worked with us at Contenders for a bit. They didn't commentate. But this was Monty and Doa back at commentary for the first time, I like to say, in like a year since they quit Apex and let those Apex casters do that. I think it was Wolf and Achilles, of course, but then it was like some League of Legends casters as well. Papa
Atlas
Smithy.
and Seth. Atlas and Papa Smithy, I mean.
Yeah. So Monty and Doa, biggest match going into the Overwatch League. Like, this was so epic.
Look at the compositions that are being run right now as well. The Seoul Dynasty's got a quad tank on the board with Ana Lucia. And the Dallas Fuel are running
because I can't see.
The Dallas Fuel are running Mickey on Orisa and Taimu on Hog, and then they've got Harry Hook playing Bastion.
I can't see. There's a big tripod
Solo support.
Oh, right. Oh, unlucky, Bren. But these comps are crazy. Like, this is day one comps. What I'm interested in is, had you guys even scrimmed? Like, any of the Owl teams before that? Was there, like, a proper preseason where you guys had the meta figured out?
There was a pretty long time, if I remember correctly, in which we arrived to how long until we had our first match. Because we had that preseason matches, remember, as well, leading into it in January, where we played against the Mayhem. So there was definitely a meta forming. Quad Tank was still really strong, but there was definitely, like, obviously Junkertown is a unique one throughout the history of Overwatch of just being an absolute nightmare in terms of like working out like what is supposed to be played, because as you see here, we have Pirate Ship with our second support player playing Bastion. So anyone who says they don't like hero limits or like role lock, you got to come watch these games and sort of reevaluate a little bit. But there was definitely practice coming into here. This was interesting because actually coming up into this point, we knew that Seoul wasn't as strong as everyone thought they were going to be, and we knew we weren't as strong as everyone thought we were going to be. So as much as this was to the fans a Clash of the Titans, I think everyone in this match sort of knew was like, where these teams aren't really living up to expectations at this point. At this point, the good teams are like London. Like at this point, like we've been scrimming and it's like London's really good and stuff. So it's gone back and forth, and NYXL obviously.
What happened? That was crazy. I don't know, but we're back in the game.
I can't
that was wild. I mean,
you can't hear me?
But can
no,
hear
we
us?
can hear you. We can hear you. I don't know. Everything's blowing up at the moment.
Can we keep talking, or
I'm just going to assume we can.
Yeah.
Wow, this podcast is about on par the quality of this match. Unbelievable.
The decision making in terms of compositions baffles me, and it's so hard to tell in these old games whether people just were making the wrong decisions or whether you don't remember what the patch was. Because like they've transitioned now so that Fleta has moved over from a tank. I can't even remember what Fleta was playing. What was Fleta playing? Like the
Roadhog, right? They were playing Quad Tank?
yeah, he was playing
Roadhog to begin with. Yeah, the Junkrat actually.
Now he's playing Junkrat. And so Seagull's moved over to Farah. And it feels like, I don't know, it feels like I'm watching a different game. Just a completely different game.
Yeah.
Like
Well, I think
ranked,
Bastion was so powerful here, Custa.
Yeah.
So you had to do Pirate Ship.
Yeah, I think Bastion was really prominent in season 1 on Junkertown, but I think this is back in the idea that the counter to Bastion was just raw damage, right? And that's what the Junkrat's doing here is like you can sit in this window and you can just shoot. And we actually remember having issues with this, and that's why Seagull goes to the Farriers, because it was really hard to deal with the window because they can just consistently throw mines through there against the Bastion. So therefore you go something that has height and range, and then you can just pocket that. Obviously, the issue that we have is that as a Mercy, I have to pocket the Farah and the Bastion, and it's probably not going to work. But we're going to probably see that as this happens.
Well,
but isn't this a ridiculous game? I'm trying to remember this map, and I'm starting to... It's all coming back to me.
It's coming back to you?
Yeah, it's all coming back to me, I think, a little bit, this match.
We moved the TV because I couldn't see because there was a tripod in the way, and it just fucked everything. Just everything just broke, and it's just been on fire the past like 10 minutes. I have no idea what you guys have been talking about. I've been interrupting you.
We're talking about the comps.
Seems
we're
like
talking about the compositions because they're just crazy. Like it seems like a lot of the metagame right now is you have a strat, the enemy team tries to break your strat, and you just run heroes to stop them breaking it.
Yeah.
Like Effect seems like he's running the Reaper because they were running a lot of tanks. So now Munchkin's gone Soldier because you guys are running Reaper and Farah. It's like ranked theory where it's all about the heroes, not about the comps.
Yeah. Like, especially towards the end, like at least when I was playing, is like everyone had like these meta comps and everyone played it, and switching was very rare, especially to these like unique characters like Soldier and Reaper. While back in the day, like Seagull goes Junkrat now. Like it doesn't really seem like there's a whole lot of rhyme or reason, rather than I feel like I would be more effective on this.
Yeah.
Like we have Effect quad TPing to the backline of the Seoul Dynasty right now.
Yeah, it is crazy because 2018 was also the season where I feel like we got Dive really refined. There were teams obviously playing Dive comp. I mean, it had been a thing in Apex Season 4 for like the entire time, both Soldier Tracer and Genji Tracer. But it was like Overwatch League was using, it felt like to me the narrative of 2018 was finding ways to break weird comps with Dive until at the end of it, well, maybe not actually for the eventual finals, but for a lot of the later stages, people were able to just run it full time, whereas that's not what you saw at all at the beginning of stage 1.
Yeah, I also think that actually it was way easier to play dive at that time, because now if you try to play dive, like, people can sort of break it down and, you know, apply some pressure in some ways to make it really hard to play dive. But I think the thinking was in the first season of the Overwatch League that if you were a pretty bad team or an average team, if you just play dive, everyone would have the same mindset to just go in, and it would be way easier to play those kind of compositions, because you would play like New York Excelsior that play their slow Zenyatta composition with Jonak and whatever, and it's like, if you couldn't match them in that way of thinking, like, why bother? And that's why you see some of these teams just kind of like playing kind of like whatever, just going in to gain that confidence and try to be on the same page, more so than trying to be experts at one particular composition, which we see nowadays. So I think you look at Seoul's comp here, like, they're just kind of like, first they're playing this quad tank thing where they're just like, let's just rush the Bastion because it's simple, everyone knows that they're just gonna rush the Bastion, and then Fleta swaps to Junkrat because he has some high ground position, of course, so he can spam down the nades, etc. But like, it's all just like, let's just dive onto this target and try to shut down this target. It's way more simplistic in the strategy and tactics. The first season.
We're also missing the step as well. You got to remember, we go to dive in like the middle towards the end of the season, but then it goes heavily towards Widowmaker. Widowmaker becomes like almost a staple at the very end. And then at the very final hour, and trust me, I can go on a rant about this thing, we went to that triple tank, double sniper, solo support, Mercy for the grand finals. Yeah, get excited. Woo, but that's sort of where we ended up, right? Like those were the moments that, like, we've seen so much like evolution throughout Overwatch. I think we probably grew the most in 2018 when you had everyone came together, all the best players, and then like it starts off very chaotic, as you saw, you know, which we start on tank and then we end up on dive, but it definitely normalizes as the season goes on.
Yeah, it was wild to see the melting pot of teams playing, because this was essentially the beginning of the esport. I mean, you can talk about Apex, and Apex really did a lot.
That was very important. Come on.
It was still its own bubble. Apex was still its own bubble. You didn't have the elite teams from everywhere in the world and like all the elite players trying to make the best teams possible competing in the central location. Like, you didn't have these kind of developments in the meta and in the game happening during Apex seasons. It was smaller, slower.
And one quick note about Apex before you move on with your point. It was very elitists at the time because it was so invite dependent for the European and North American teams that you sort of had to be like buddy with OGN to actually get an invite to Apex, where there was no qualifying system. It was sort of just like, hey, are you a popular Western team or have you had significant success? Like, there were teams like, I think Team Giganti and IP at the time, I don't think they ever went to Apex because they just weren't as popular. They weren't as popular, and that was a big part. But if the owners were like, hey, Apex, we have this big organization, that automatically gave you some clout and a higher chance of getting an invite. So Apex, of course, it was like the best competition at the time, I'd like to say, but it was not like this epic global event because there was no way to actually qualify for it. You had to get an invite, and sometimes there is something like Misfits. When we were there and participated in Apex, I would say there were better European and North American times, but we got an invite because we were a pretty big org and we had big traction because we had big members, etc. So that is a footnote you have to add about Apex at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's like why you saw me like screaming and screeching at the crowd just before. Like, this is like, I'm playing against Seoul Dynasty. These guys are like literally the Apex teams that like we wish that you could ever play against when you were like, you know, in the early stages before the Overwatch League. Like, I went to Apex as Fnatic and we got absolutely bodied by everybody. We lost the Kongu Pantera and Runaway, and so we didn't even make it out of groups.
Back when Runaway weren't actually anybody at that time as well. That was
they were on the way up when we were playing them. And that was like, because we lost to they had like a couple of like incredible players at the time, and they're like, everyone was just starting to respect them, and Kongu Pantera were incredible. So we're all of a sudden playing against all these players that like you've always wanted to play against, and it's going to be a round robin you're always going to play against. And now I'm on a team that I think we can be competitive with. So like, this is like the pinnacle for honestly every Overwatch League player. Like the initial summit thing that we did, and when we had all the best players from all around the world in one spot, that was like a pretty cool moment, seeing like these 12 best teams from around the world that could potentially be made in one spot.
Yeah, it was magical getting everybody together at the same time.
At what point? I was just going to add. At what point did you see teams comboing up abilities here? I'm looking at the compositions that we've got, and I'm correct me if I'm wrong. I'm literally looking off the hamster screen, so I can't see shit clearly as much. But like the combination, like you can see Dallas here running the Orisa and the Hog, right? I remember at the tail end of 2018, London Spitfire was so good at synergizing like Halt and Dragon Strike or Halt Hook combos, just any sort of combos with various bits of abilities. But you're just not really seeing that in this game. Was this something that developed in the middle of the game, or am I misremembering? Like in the middle of 2018?
It was something that people were aware about, but it wasn't something that you just always did. Oh my god, instant res, PTSD, instant res. Oh god, that was so fast. How did that just happen?
That's insane.
That's a lot going through that memory. Sorry, I got sidetracked. But it happened. You saw this actually at the very start of the game. We Orisa hooked, and then we Orisa pulled, and then Taimu hooked him. But you don't see it all the time. It's like very rarely. While, so as you said, towards the end, if you weren't pull hooking, pull diva bombing, pull dragon striking, just anything Orisa has in her kit, honestly, at any point, then you're just losing the game. And that's what the best teams became the best for, is because they were just syncing that up all the time.
Yeah. It's finding that consistency, isn't it? It's about not having to rely on individual pop-off moments or people flanking behind on the Reaper or whatever, and just finding the comps that can provide the most consistency every single fight.
Yeah. Do you think that comes from... I was just going to say quickly, Johnny, do you think that comes from the Overwatch League as an existence, as a system, having everybody playing in the same local area and everyone developing the game at the same time? I mean, I think it clearly pushed the game to new heights.
Oh, yeah. So that's what I wanted to get at, actually, which, great segue now, Bren. But there were multiple things that just improved the gameplay quality so much in 2018. Yeah. For one, I think that Blizzard had this coaching tool where they actually had like map overhead views for the first time. I don't know if Custa remembers that. Yeah. But that was the first time coaches actually had that. Coaches actually were a big part of the Overwatch League in 2018, but like before that, you would have like manager coaches or some credible coaches, but 2018 was when coaches really started to matter in the league. And then it just gave you an idea of like the gameplay quality. I remember having my brain actually like blown, like my mind blown, because I sat in at a Florida Mayhem practice in stage 1 and they were playing Gibraltar. Okay, this was how bad the gameplay quality was back then. They played Mercy Genji on first point Gibraltar and used a damage boost to charge up the Dragon Blade, and that was their composition, right? Because every time you saw Genji, you'd be like, oh, you gotta play with the Lucio, you gotta play with the Ana, you gotta nano boost and speed boost him in to like get him into stuff. But the fact that they played Mercy and damage boosted the Genji so he could build Blade faster, and that was a like gameplay condition, my mind was blown by that in 2018. Okay, that was the level we were at. So when they like sat down with these tools and coaches, it just dramatically increased throughout the season. I would say actually the 2018 finals between London and Philadelphia, that was actually some pretty decent play. Like it was really good at the time.
Yeah. I mean, in 2017, I remember having conversations with the Rogue players, the like full French Rogue team, when they went to Korea, and they said that it was just incredible playing against the Korean Lucios because they would actually peel the dive. Like seriously, like they didn't say it like that. I'm deliberately making it sound more silly than it is, but they were telling me like it's amazing that these Lucios are like booping the Winston away. They're like, our Winston can't do anything in the fights because you dive and you just get booped away and you don't land where you want to. And like that sounds so stupid to say now because of course teams are doing that, but you're standing on the wall of the giants.
Like, when you as a Winston try to explain that, like I'm getting booped and I can't do anything, they'd be like, just dive better, just play harder. Like, what do you mean you get booped by Lucio? So I'd always get shit for not diving good enough because I'd get booped by Lucios. And obviously you had to learn how to play around that, like jump over the Lucio, whatever. But that was actually like, it was unbelievable at the time. So you're right.
Yeah. There's so much stuff that had to be learned because the game was so new. And so it's always just going to be this learning process.
Well, you also got to remember, it's also all the teams now have almost infinite resources. Obviously not infinite, but they now have like at least 3 coaches. Every team in season 1 had that many coaches. Everyone was in the same facility. Like even all the teams were in the same facility. We're all down that long hallway where everyone practiced. And then everyone was like collaborating, talking together. Everyone's working. Everyone was scrimming like crazy. The amount of improvement, I would say, from like January of that year when everyone first arrived till like April, May, like it would be absolutely astounding on how quick the meta evolved, the teams evolved, because prior to that, we're so region, right? Like obviously Korea was one of the best regions and they were improving. They were doing the best in forms of dive and stuff like that. But North America, like and Europe, they were so like honed in on one mindset of this is how you play the game. Like obviously Europe played a lot of tank heavy compositions. North America liked to play a lot of dive, but like obviously not as well as Korea. So it was very like weird to have all the styles come together and then one final thing gets sort of like shaken out, and that was the meta for the world at that point.
So to give an example, I think a great example of how that kind of worked was when Rogue went over to
McCree off on the flank.
Why didn't he roll into him and flash him?
Oh, the duel of the widow effect going rampage. So yeah, one example I wanted to give was actually like when Rogue went over to Korea. Do you remember when they played like triple DPS and Korea was like, this is unbelievable, like AKM is a headshot machine, like how do we beat this? It took them like what, like 3-4 weeks to actually like figure out that comp, and then Rogue went out in the groups or whatever. Imagine now the Overwatch League, all the best teams from all the best regions clash. They have proper coaching staff, like they play scrims with each other every day. The level of like turnover in metas just like drastically escalated. It was so fast compared to the regions just trying to figure that stuff alone.
Let's go Fuel. Let's go Fuel.
Yeah, look at me. This is like the game. Look at Effect smiling. You didn't see that much throughout after this map. There was not much more of that. So yeah.
I mean, a crowd that was like unheard of at the time. It's like you had an Apex crowds, and you know, I remember like I Am Gyeonggi was a pretty big crowd, but like just having a crowd here, you're like, we're not playing online, we're playing LAN. It was like,
that is a rare Pepe in the Blizzard Arena. That is one of the rarest Pepes you will ever see. Holy shit! That is an interesting one. Yeah, this map is quintessential January gameplay though, because it's Junkertown already, so it's already nonsense, but it was just teams figuring stuff out so early on. And you're right, when I think about how by the time we got to like, I don't know, March, teams were playing pretty good Overwatch. It was I remember exponential improvement.
I remember sitting down with the London Spitfire coaches around the middle portion of the year, maybe just before, I can't remember what it was. It was like a month before playoffs, I think. And talking to them about like the concepts that they had learnt over the year and like some of the concepts that I thought like how Overwatch was meant to be played. Like I remember I used an example of Gladiators using a self-destruct and just capitalizing off the space it made. That was it. And they were like, yeah, no, we've been like noticing that as well. Like we need to be playing off of our ultimates more to like when there's space created, we can just jump on that. And that kind of evolution of gameplay over the year was ridiculous. I think we're skipping ahead of the break. TV in front of me keeps flicking on and off, so I've just been Mr. Pepe, unfortunately.
You missed the rare Pepe.
As xQc, subbing in for Seagull.
This really was an all-star team in terms of like personalities as well.
It was unreal.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I think they were at the point where I think Dallas was like, we have Envious. We have theoretically the best team in the world. We can just pick up a marketable team for the rest of the fields. That's why they filled in. Like, obviously, Seagull and xQc are both good players in their own right, but they're probably like, even going into this point, they weren't the best players coming into the Overwatch League. So they were just sort of like filling out the roster with people that would be marketable, that would bring fans, but also be able to sub in if you want. I actually did want to like tangent off here as well. Something that I think is really interesting is you said like the gameplay got so much better in a few months. I think that's why all the power rankings at the very start of the season literally became bogus, because the teams that were good sometimes just didn't improve at the level of these other teams. And that's why you saw, especially I think the Korean teams got so far ahead because they have that drive, they have that hustle, and I think they know how to utilize the rigorous training that we're going through. Well, I think a lot of Western teams really fell flat. Like Houston Outlaws started really strong. Very strong in stage one. I think they went
with Junkrat,
They went like 24 maps in a row or something like that. And then the demise of them throughout the rest of the season as they just struggled to keep up with the rest of the teams was really interesting seeing through the evolution of season one.
Do you want me to count down, Kurt, for the next match.
Oh yeah, sorry. What time am I at?
We're on 20. What is it? 24/7. What is that?
No, 34-17.
34/17. Okay.
Yeah, I'm ready.
We'll go on go this time. We'll change it up.
All right, we'll mix it up. Okay, great.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1, go.
Wonderful. I always thought that xQc was pretty good, actually. Like, I thought if he had really, people think of him as a bit of a meme. Like, he wasn't. I don't know. Either you're an xQc fan or you just think that he was a joke that was picked up because he was a big personality. But you played on a team with him right before. I was going to ask you this question live, but I never got around to it, Custa. What team were you playing on before Dallas?
We actually played on a team called Arc 6, and I was on that team for like a whole span of like 2 weeks. But we played one tournament and we came like 3rd to Rogue, and that's where the famous quote from xQc says, "They went to Korea," and that's we did it phenomenally well. And you look back at that roster, Arc 6 was myself and Ginger Pop on support line, xQc and Space on tank, and then you had Dante and a person called ZZA, who was an incredible flex DPS player. He was a great player. Like, honestly, every single one of those players could have been in the Overwatch League. Like, they were all really good at what they did. But the issue that we had is, like, we were trying to market ourselves as a team that could get signed as one whole unit into the Overwatch League, which would have been funny if that had actually, like, looking back now. But we just couldn't find a team. Like, it was really hard to find, like, you know, teams that wanted to sign a full 6 players. So, but yeah, like, talking about xQc, he is a very smart player when it comes to playing the game. He cannot explain what he's thinking that well. Like, he has great ideas, and you watch him play and you're like, why'd you do that? And he's like, I don't know, it just seemed like the right thing. But it's actually like the right play, and it's very smart. I think where he really struggled was a full-time rigorous our schedule is where he fell short in the Overwatch League. I just think he really struggled to show up to practice every day on time, 100% alert, and not worrying about what is happening with his stream and stuff like that. So he could easily have made it in the league if he put everything he had into it. I just don't think he ever did.
Yeah, I don't think that was a hot take. Like,
no, it's not a hot take. Just sort of giving my first person, perspective.
I thought he had the potential to be like one of the best main tank players in the world. Like, he was unbelievable. Yeah. Also, I mean, we can continue talking about this xQc, but like when people started boosting up here, this was like revolutionary. Talk to that, like when people boosted up here, like, how do you break it? How do you break it? Like, people couldn't figure out. There were teams in season 1 that didn't cap like point A for like months. Like, they just couldn't figure it out.
Why are they running triple tank with it though?
Yeah, what the fuck is going on?
Why are they running triple tank? Have they got Taimu contesting the point? Is that the idea, that Mickey and xQc stay on the high ground?
Yeah,
Taimu
I think
contest
so.
point.
Well, I think they're looking for we're looking for the pull hooks. Like, I think that's the win condition that we're looking. Yeah, like you can see it off the bat. Like, they're trying to pull, but obviously
this is offense,
exists
of course.
in the game. So Dallas is on offense, and I think they want Mickey to be able to go up. What is the Lucio here for? Is the better question. What is a Lucio? Oh, he killed Ryo Jehung. Never mind. I got nothing.
This was before the Genji strat as well, because remember, like you'd take Genji, like flanker on the left through the windows to get to the back. Like, this was at the start where people were like, how do you like actually get people off the high ground here?
Yeah. There's so much space given to the... Oh my god, wow.
The Widowmaker.
That was nice. So much space given not just to the Widow, but to the entire attacking team, right? Like, you're not contesting any of that ground as they come in.
Look at how much they're getting away with here.
Yeah.
It just gives me more weight to my argument about hit scan play over the years.
Right. Yeah, I mean, do you want to re-explain that argument, actually? Because that was a really good time to talk about it.
Yeah, so you're seeing right now this Widowmaker. I think Widowmaker was in a much stronger state at this point as well. Like, I don't know what the grapple cooldown was on. Maybe it was actually... It got buffed. I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to talk about the balance of Widowmaker. But, like, I think when people think of these old Widowmaker players, you can see effect. He's popping off. Has anyone gone to punish him on the right-hand side at all? Is anyone playing out of his line of sight here? No. No one is doing anything to mitigate the impact he's having by playing out of his line of sight. They're just walking into his sight line. It's so slow to react to his presence. And this is what a lot of the early 2018 hit scan play was like, with players like Pine and Carpe getting away with murder. No one playing around the Widowmaker. No one punishing a Widowmaker player at all. No one trying to just essentially prevent them from playing these angles. And I think as time has gone on, as teams have got better and better and better at playing those angles and essentially forcing Widowmaker players to, you have to play either an incredibly aggressive angle, of which case we're going to kill you because you're too far forward, or you have to play this tiny window of opportunity for you to pop off, and you have to rely on your team to try and create space to allow the openings for you to hit headshots.
Here's actually the effect replay here.
Oh my lord!
And you can see this replay here.
God.
Like,
I mean,
everyone's just standing out in the open.
But yeah,
This was before Sigma and Wrecking Ball too, you know.
They
got
just weren't
the same
ready for
tools.
Yeah, I think as well when I watch the old hit scan players, what springs to mind in my head is that the teams they're playing against tend to have less discipline, so they don't. For example, if one of their players is going to pressure the Widowmaker, the others don't play slowly to wait for that reinforcement. They just still try and take the fight. So you end up like, I feel like these teams that were playing at the beginning of 2018 were worried about allocating resources to the Widow because they thought they'd just lose the rest of the team fight. Whereas now teams have got so much better with like actually leaving one player to harass but playing slowly on the rest of the point, and then once the other guy comes in, you can take the fights a bit better. And the communication and the coordination is all there to allocate attention differently. Whereas if you think about like if Miro had just dived up top and tried to kill Effect there, I feel like they just turn around
to
kill
grapple
Miro
away
the rest
out of that angle doesn't cost that much in terms of resources.
Right, but there was none of that thought. They were just, when you see Miro play Winston, he just jumps onto people if he wants to deal with them. Like, that's what he was doing on Junkertown as well. It's not as nuanced.
Yeah, this leads me to the later point I'm making, which is like how I don't think you need a star hit scan player, which the counterpoint to that is like, oh, what about Arns with the shock? But I think there's outliers for it. Like Arns is a rare case of just an unbelievable freak hit scan player. And of course, you're going to see value just off the back of him, of what the shock is able to create. The shock as a team, of course, is going to be creating space all the time for him to pop off. But in general, like the windows of opportunities that hit scan players can play in, especially with Widowmaker, has narrowed over time. And now it does come off the back of it, like just a base level of hit scan expectations can do the job when it comes to the Overwatch League, I feel.
What an interesting composition from Dallas on the defense, because they're so close to getting something that works, I think, but then they have Harry Hook on Soldier. Like, I felt like the Junkrat Widow became meta on this map for... I mean, it still occasionally rears its head again, but...
Correct me if I'm wrong here. Custa, you might know better than me. But before Dallas became Envy, was that the time when Harry was like their damage player? And when he swapped over to support, I think... he wanted to play DPS, and I think there was also some community push or fan base push for him to play more DPS. So he would have these moments, right, where he would just want to play Soldier or like push to play Soldier just because he wanted to, right? Am I wrong in that?
No, you're 100% right. Envy had this like identity of Harry Hook on Soldier was like
incredible,
ridiculously good for a support player. He was up there with one of the best, like relevant to almost AKM, who was like known as the Soldier player. And I think it was just so unique because they had this strategy of one support, Soldier as your second support, and it just did so much damage. I think one of the fundamental issues that Dallas Fuel had is they were so stuck in their old ways as everything evolved so quickly, like we talked about, that they just fell behind so much with the times. This Soldier type of thing, all that kind of stuff. They kept trying to make all these unique things work that worked in the early forms of Overwatch that just didn't work as time went on. And like you sort of like see this from time to time. You're like, this doesn't make sense looking back. And it just worked for them, I think, because they were so good in the history of Overwatch in like 2017.
So I can ask you as well then, was there a lot of like different mindsets going into the Dallas Fuel, because you had so many players coming from different teams, and then they came to this team and everyone had like different ideas of what Dallas Fuel should be or what it was?
Yeah,
like, strategically.
I don't want to get too much into it because obviously it's kind of like an enigma that no one's never really answered. But I would say the failure of Dallas Fuel is definitely just due to like there was this massive disconnect on how everyone viewed the game. Like, I'm obviously a very opinionated person. Seagull's a very opinionated person. We have Kai as head coach. We have all of the MV squad coming in. We have all these new players coming in, and there was just so many holes, and we couldn't solve all the problems fast enough. And we just, I don't know, it just never really came together. Like, no meta, no idea. Everything we tried just didn't work. And it just got worse and worse. And when you have that expectation on you to be the best team in the league as well, it just sort of weighs down on everything as well. And I think that's what created all these cracks. And then eventually, Dallas Fuel just breaking apart altogether.
And I don't think that's like that's scandalous. Is that the word to use? Like, I don't think that's like a big surprise. Like, I think in hindsight, when you look at this roster and how it was put together, it's quite easy to just think that you know, like there's a lot of players coming from different teams here. Like, it's going to be a bit of a mess. And there was obviously so much pressure on Dallas to perform as well. Like, no wonder like that happened, and there were some growing pains that you weren't able to like rise up from. So I don't think that's like, you know, a hot take or Riji Hong with his
with his desk,
his mouse, and like he'd sit so far down and just like lean up. It'd be great. We haven't talked too much about Seoul Dynasty. We should do that in the second half, maybe.
Well, I was just looking at the gameplay there, and Seoul Dynasty are running this Genji Tracer dive, right? And Miro jumps in and he gets melted, but because they have insta res, Toby just comes in straight afterwards and reses him up again, and so he doesn't. Like, Miro's just literally, I remember Fraggy doing this all the time in stage 1 as well, where they're just suiciding in to create space. There's no incentive to play intelligently on the Winston at all, because your best play is actually to int as hard as you can and then get res later on in the fight once you've made space for your team. It's a wild, what a wild way of playing dive.
Well, again, I think it comes down a little bit to the fact that there just weren't enough tools back then. Like, you didn't have Sigma, you didn't have Wrecking Ball, and so main tanks were often like just crowbarred into these compositions to try to get some kind of value, and it was very punishing to play those roles. Like, it was very, like, if you got headshot by a Widow, you were done for. You just gotta dive in, you were trapped, you're done for. It was very YOLO-like, and I think in hindsight, I like to think like, oh, you know, this great gameplay, it was so exciting, it was so punishing, it was so top tier, but like, it really was just kind of shit because you didn't have any other options.
I mean, it is extremely punishing, though. I mean, you are. It's very punishing.
But it was a bit like Counter-Strike almost, where like you peek an angle and you take a shot and you're not dead, but like you're really low health. It was very much like hold corners. Jump in a short timing, show your back against the Widowmaker to not get headshot, like very punishing like that.
There's so much that can melt you. Like the Discord orb, I think Widowmaker is like, she has a ridiculous charge rate of her rifle as well in this patch, because it seems like they're just popping headshots, 200 damage headshots like no one's business. And then of course the damage boost as well.
Yeah. You've got damage boost, you've got Discord, you've got the Tracer and the Junkrat who's trying to juggle you around with his tires.
I mean, Junkrat, I just don't know what the fuck's going on.
Oh my god!
Wow.
I mean, the Junkrat was a pretty effective counter dive tool as well, because
because the mines.
You couldn't really focus a single target because the mines just juggle you around, deny you from the high grounds of places you're playing. And look at this, the reses are just crazy.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the biggest things of like why this was such a weird meta as well, is because honestly, the best thing that you could play was something that could get value, but also just be rezzed easily. And that was something about like Winston, right? As long as you didn't die in like Narnia, like you were fine, because like the moth could just come and res you instantly. And that's like, you were talking about before, Josh, about like teams just gave so much space. It was like this ideology of like, everyone just sort of like postures and then you're like, okay, we're going to fight. That's not how Overwatch works anymore. There is like 3 different fights happening on the point of the map at different times. There's Tracers duelings, there's Widows checking sidelines, there's tanks fighting for positioning. There is so much work that's being done and like so much individual and sort of like duo and trio play. While in this, it was just like very like, okay, we're running forward. And then just like, what ultimates are we going to use? Okay, just use these ones and then we just run at each other. Like the growth of like team play, but also controlling space is just not even really recognized at this point.
That's the huge thing, is controlling the space on the defense. That's the massive thing that I'm noticing is missing. And I think, okay, it's especially going to be pronounced in this game because this ends up being a 6-5 on Anubis. So, of course, the defensive teams were doing something incorrectly. But this is a great example, I think, to showcase how much the defensive teams are not really fighting for early control. I mean, it actually looks like this whole dynasty are set up to do so here with their dive defense at the beginning. But we'll see how this works out. But aside from this, we haven't really seen people controlling the point or trying to put early damage on people as they enter through an area, or like try and actually deny early positioning to people, or at least make them work for it.
I wonder if the Insta Mercy res has essentially held back the game for the few short months that it was in. in terms of just play. Like, you weren't thinking intelligently about how to mitigate damage to not feed ultimate charge. You were just worried about getting a maximum value, inting onto the high HP targets, and swinging again with the resurrect so that you have like.
Just like look at that strategy, and you can understand how like Dallas Fuel just ran to the point, and then Seoul dove them, and it was just like, well, let's see who wins. Like there was no rhyme or reason to that.
Why did Seoul wait until they got to the point
Before they dove?
Well, I mean,
they dove for the Mercy, obviously, and Mercy was on the point, so they just go.
Yeah, that is a weird one. I feel like if that, I mean, you'd be asking questions if teams were running the same compositions, of course. But if you were running the same kind of team comps, I feel like you take the early pick on, like, if they have managed to get to the point too quickly because Harry's speed boosting there, you take the early pick on effect, and then you come back and you try and take the high
remember,
ground.
this is insta-res Mercy. You can't protect the body anymore. Like that ideology doesn't work anymore. Like Mercy can literally, because I think I'm right about this. I'm not 100% sure. It was a while ago, but I think as soon as you rezzed, your Guardian Angel went off cooldown as well. So therefore, as soon as you rezzed, you could fly again. Yeah. So that like it was just so easy to res people. So the Mercy was always the most valuable.
Right. Yeah. What the hell are you supposed to do against that?
Oh my god, I do not miss this meta at all.
No.
Yeah, it's horrific.
I think part of it as well.
Yeah.
Was just buying time for the Widowmaker like this. Like obviously it's a bit different this fight. But as Bren mentioned, like Widowmakers were so powerful that if you could just buy time, I think referencing point A as well, like you will hold far back on point A just to buy more time until the attackers actually reached you. Because if you fought early on in the point, it was easier to shut down the Widowmaker. So you would just like buy as much time as possible for the Widowmaker because it was just OP.
I feel like the I don't know what these defensive teams are really missing though is some way of putting a lot of pressure on them as they're actually running in through the choke. They're literally just, I mean, they're actually just speed boosting in through chokes without taking any damage, right? Because they're running like Genji Tracer dive comps. It doesn't seem like, I mean, isn't that the best way of trying to play against these kind of things? Maybe that's why Junkrat Widow ended up being better though, because you are actually
just go back for it.
Well, this is actually a point I wanted to bring up on the first point is the Winston dive on first point defense was actually really prominent for all the Korean teams. They loved doing that on the first point Anubis, while a lot of Western teams, they loved the Junkrat. And that's what made the Houston Outlaws so famous is that Jake Junkrat defense on first point because it was so hard to dive and it was so hard to break. But I think this is like goes back to the same point I was making. Now, when you think about it, if you're playing dive against a double shield team or a shield heavy team that has high damage, all you do is you give them the front and you flank. So that like, how is the Seoul Dynasty playing dive and somehow effect finds a free shot on the top of the archway without being pressured by the Winston, the Diva, or the Genji? Like that doesn't make any sense. Like in the ideology of now how you play the game. So like, I think it's just weird how these teams are playing dive and thinking like how wrong we were playing it back then compared to how we are playing it now.
Right, and is that also because of the insta-res Mercy that just kind of set back that way of thinking? You're not thinking about how to intelligently engage and how to maximize your own HP pool because the quick and easy solution is essentially just chucking bodies at it and you can undo the damage instantly. You can have like a 500 health swing instantly.
But also, it's really hard to let the opponents, like, you have to punish the opponent Mercy really fast. Otherwise, they get away with murder, too. So it's a multi-pronged kind of thing that caused the issues here, I think. And, yeah, I am inclined to agree with you that it did. At the end of the day, though, the dive actually ended up being good even after Mercy had been nerfed. Dallas are trying to play some like multi-pronged defense here where they're playing from multiple high grounds, but Seoul are eating their butts.
They just don't seem to have a solution to Fleta. Like Fleta just seems to be doing whatever he wants running around this map right now and just like one-tapping everyone.
Yeah, what I'm interested in as well though is that Dallas just hold their grounds on all of the high grounds. They don't try and move around the map as the defense to like. You know, when teams will get dived these days, you give up a high ground and you'll reposition somewhere else and you'll continue to poke them from a distance. The Dallas Fuel are essentially running a poke comp there, I guess, kind of like Junkrat Soldier kind of stuff. But they don't give up the high grounds when they get pressured. They just stand their ground and die.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of confidence in the other high grounds to like help you out. So like if they dove you, then the other people on the other high ground would be open to just kill the opponents for you. And so you'd like have your like sentry points where you just stand, and then they couldn't dive all of you at once. I think Seoul Dynasty, you know, they didn't have the best season 1, but they were one of the smaller teams, like with Miro, Winston, and Fleta Genji, to actually maneuver those kind of points and like diving properly with the monkeys that are like, that was Miro's expertise. Like, how do you dive safely without taking too much damage and like actually maneuver around the map, right? So they were actually quite good at shutting this down.
This is interesting. Dallas Fuel are running a Sombra defense here, and Taimu's got his EMP. They forced the trance out of Yu Jiehong, but they've died, and they've immediately got all of the space.
He used it. Oh, he killed a Tracer.
I mean, he's just used it to solo kill a
he
Tracer,
just used
I
it.
guess.
Yeah, I was surprised.
But it just
and then they just, and I think this is a mindset of back then as well, is that if you can just force the Transcendence out, it's like, then you can, like, all you need to do is get a team fight winning ultimate, right? Because like, if you get one pick, it doesn't matter, as we just saw. Like, we just saw 4 picks and they all became redundant instantly. Like, I think getting the Transcendence out is worth it if you can get a high value EMP. And the reason this defense falls apart is they get the Transcendence out, but then Taimu solo EMPs a Tracer. Like, it wasn't worth it. He's better off like saving it for this moment where he can hit 4 or 5 people and you can kill, because you need to kill 3 people to get an effective pick. So like, I think it was just sort of like a mistake by Taimu in this point.
It is absolutely bonkers, though, the impact that Mercy's having in these games, because when you think about it these days, if someone gets resurrected, you're like, okay, they got rezzed, but they had to burn a bunch of abilities to be able to get the Mercy in position to get a safe res. The res is now on cooldown. We can think about that, and we can use that as an advantage in the fight. The Mercy's just zipping around in the sky, doesn't require any abilities to set up. There's no punish possible. And also, when they res, it's not like a cooldown that you can track and play around, because they just get it up again immediately, and they're able to insta-res somebody else. It's so hard to play around.
It was the moth meta for a reason. It was just, there's just moths in the sky just reviving, and like, it was chaos. People hated it.
Some people hated it, some people loved it.
I think people, in general, I think the community sentiment at the time was that it was a really bad meta to kick off the Overwatch League on.
Yeah,
I think that was
Absolutely,
the community sentiment at the time, because we had great metas before this. We had like, actually we had that Soldier Winston composition, but people were so tired of it that I remember like Jeff Kaplan made that post about like balancing, and they were like, oh, we're gonna do it like StarCraft, where like, you know, it takes like 2 years maybe, but eventually they'll figure out the counter to a strategy, and we'll just let the game play out itself. And obviously we're way past that now, but we came off that soldier meta that lasted for like a year, I think, in Korea, and then into the Moth Mercy meta now, and people were like, just like, WTF, like, what's happening? This is crazy. And then Stage 2 was when I remember like the Valiant, and Custa was on the Valiant at that time as well. That's where I think Agility's Genji started being played more. There were more dive heavy styles in Stage 2 and 3, I think. I could be wrong.
I joined in halfway through the season. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but with the meta as well. I think in Stage 2, 3, it was more Genji, right? And
100% was, because I think, did they nerf Mercy?
Yeah, they know
Stage 2.
Yeah,
well, that might have been Stage 2, and then everyone started playing a lot more Lucio, Ana, Zen, and all that kind of stuff. Because that was the next issue that Dallas had, was that we didn't really have a good dive. Like our team fundamentally could not play dive well. Because if you think about Envy never really played dive very effectively, like super effectively, right? Because they don't really have that star Genji player. They, the dive in itself, like when you think of Coco, his Winston wasn't, in my opinion, his strongest part of his game. Then you have xQc, so now you're trying to put xQc into the ideology of
Mickey as well,
joining Dallas Fuel.
I think Mickey stagnated as a player as well, so hard at the start of the Dallas Fuel for 2018. If you think about I think off-tank was one of the positions that evolved probably the most in 2018. In terms of how it was played. Like, people got very intelligent very quickly at how to play it. And if you got left behind, it was so integral to a part of the dive in terms of your cooldown management and how you were playing that one particular role. Like, having a good diva player was so important.
Yeah.
What am I witnessing
Yeah, I
in
don't know
these
what
plays? Okay, so to sum up, Dallas Fuel have been speed boosting to point so that they have the low ground. And Effect has been playing from like the market or the point area when sniping, whereas Fleta grappled and Effect actually tried to flank all the way around the left, like up and behind them as well. Whereas Fleta's been like going to the attacker arch to be able to get a replay. Instead of Dallas Fuel rotating to like the high ground where Munchkin and Ryuji Hong are playing, pushing those guys off and then having Effect play from arch, they're just speed boosting to point. I'm really confused as to why that's happening, but I guess this is the first time Seoul. Look at this, like Effect's trying to rotate around that side instead of waiting for his team to create the space for him. He's going on the flank. It's wild.
It's an old school way of thinking as well, but like Dallas keeps doing the same thing over and over again. We're at a 6-4. Maybe it's time to like change up a strategy or something like that. Like back in the day, everyone used to like, if it worked once, it'll work again. Like they've sped to point every single time they've been on this first point attack, to the point that you saw Fleta knew where Effect was going to peak and when he was going to peak. He like saw the exact moment and then just peaks and Effect dies. Like, and then Dallas just keeps hitting their head against this point. Like it's just odd, as you said, having this like almost like thinking this was Overwatch League level times, because like the play is just nowhere near.
Yeah, like you want to use what worked in scrims, or like what worked. You want to go for a strat, especially if you're playing, especially if you're still trying to figure out the game at the, right at the beginning of the season. The meta's still developing. You don't want to just try and wing it halfway through. So I can understand where teams were coming from. It's just that with the benefit of hindsight, we know that the better thing to do is just get your players to the point where they can improvise.
Yeah, but I mean, especially like I mentioned earlier, like this high ground positioning that Seoul are now abusing.
Oh, now
like,
they swapped.
Oh yeah, they did swap actually. Effect Genji. Fun to see that. But like I said, like point A Anubis like was an actual conundrum. Like people just couldn't wrap their heads around it. Like you can see the flank coming in here now. Like that was a great shot actually. But like people just didn't know how to deal with it. Like it's not like you could say like, oh, let's just go dive, or let's go this comp, let's play around this pick. Like people were, when people selected compositions to counter this point A defense, they actually felt kind of hopeless because they didn't know how to do it. Like there was no thought out way that you kind of had to scramble. And now they're obviously scrambling because their main strategy died. And so there was so little, there were just so few strategies that worked to defeat this point A defense that I think there's some desperation in the play of Dallas Fuel, because there's like at the time there was no creativity. Like there was no way you knew how to actually take this down apart from your main strategy.
But that's the thing about creativity, is it's not just like you can't be mad at the Dallas Fuel here for not inventing the way of winning on Anubis point A, right? Like that would be ridiculous to say that, oh, they're so bad they can't even come up with it. I mean, it's the process of many teams trying many different things, figuring out one thing that works, and then people realizing, oh, that's the reason that works. Now let's try some different things that are related, see if we can improve on it. It's like you're all learning from each other and copying from each other and learning as a group, as a collective. So obviously the first games you're going to be destroyed. I feel like though there isn't really too much of that anymore in, I don't know. There aren't very many maps where there's just areas that you feel hopeless pushing against them. I can't.
I feel like
areas like that. Do any of them still exist in the game?
Maybe
on Paris actually.
Yeah, they still exist. Like I think it's the way that the strength of the spots that they were in, right, is like Seoul Dynasty has that spot, and it feels like a really hopeless thing to do because you can't play Widowmaker against it because their Widowmaker is permanently pocketed and sitting behind a shield. You can't like fully dive it. You can't really like spread out because they can just pick you like apart. Like it was like a hard problem to solve, because I remember like trying to solve this problem, and like that's why we did we're gonna run to point and just be really tanky on the point, because if you force them to drop, that was your win condition, right? So there is ideas. I think it's less common these days because I think people have just worked out, because we've been playing the game for so long, what the win conditions of these maps are. Like now, if you think about it, attacking first point Anubis, the best way to break that defense is to get top right. If you can get one or two people in the top right, force them to look at you, the rest of your team walks around for free. But Dallas didn't try to do that once. They were just trying to get in through the left side, and that gave Seoul Dynasty a free rotation. So I think it's just players have got smarter and teams have got smarter on understanding not only as a team but individually how you attack these points.
Yeah, I think as time was closing out this map, sorry, Bren, with Soldier and xQc going primal as well. Love to see this. I think there are different problems, and I think nowadays it's less about solving map design problems where like positioning is key, and it's more about solving out like compositions, because at this point in the game we've sort of figured out all of the positional like all the positioning. What am I going with this? They were like, we sold the maps, like Custa said. Like there's no positioning cheese anymore, and there was a time where like Pirate Ship was so good on Junkertown if you knew the positioning and how to move along the map as well, whereas now it's like you know how to counter the positioning part. It's actually the composition part that is harder to break down and harder to get an advantage in, but there was so much like positional cheese that we hadn't explored at the time. So sorry, go on.
I was gonna say that I think the understanding of like how to look at a map and immediately dictate where the strong areas to hold are, where to punish. That's something that was developing at the time, and now I think it's just a skill that people go onto a map, and it doesn't take as long anymore to try and figure out some of these maps. Obviously, it's depending on the compositions and like the meta at the time, and I think we've already elaborated pretty hard on the impact of like the insta-res mercy and how that had an effect on the way teams approach a lot of these fights. But yeah, it's interesting to look at that, and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, why are they not just going onto the right side and like slowly taking map control away and forcing them out and choking them out and then setting up an engagement for the rest of the team? It is very much brute force, but like you said, Josh, you can't think of it like that because we have already been blessed with the information of literally 3 years of gameplay.
It's not. That's the thing. It's not creativity for us. It's memory. Right? Like we've remembered it, we've seen it before, so it's recall. Whereas for them, it was like actually you had to come up with the strategy to be able to win. And I think that choking out idea that you had there, Bren, is part of the reason why New York were actually the best team in the entirety of 2018, is because these positional things had not been figured out. And New York's biggest strength was they would fight for the key positions on every map, set up on the best areas possible, and just choke you out. And you were just left in a corner where you couldn't fight against them properly. You felt hopeless because they had all the best positions on attack or defense.
It's actually funny because it reminds me of a thing that happened earlier this season for Johnny, when Johnny was looking at why Sinatra switched to Doomfist on second point Eichenwald when they were losing. And Johnny went on this, like, and Johnny's right. He goes on this, like, down the rabbit hole of, like, the reason he has to go Doomfist is because his tanks are getting isolated. He needs to apply more pressure onto the back line. So he needs to play Doomfist and he needs to have that, like, presence, right? And he does that. And Sinatra responds to him on Twitter being like, I don't know, bro. I just thought Doomfist would work. See, but Sinatra has played the game so much that he instantly has that recognition of this is how we can win the game, right? He doesn't have to go down this long process of like this, and this. He understands that that is the win condition. Oh, that's the time UMP that we missed, by the way. It was not good. Sorry.
We've skipped ahead now, Custa.
Okay, where are we at?
I think we should go to the last map because we don't have much more time remaining.
This one is only 9 minutes long.
Yeah, this one's 9 minutes.
So quick.
We won't have enough time to finish the series.
Oh, won't we?
No.
How long is the last one?
How much?
Do you have an out, or is it just me, Bren?
Yeah, I think so. But
do you guys have an out?
I mean, we kind of do, yeah.
Okay. Well.
Okay, if you want to skip Ilios, that's fine.
I mean,
I thought we were waiting for Jonathan, and Jonathan said he was fine.
We can skip Ilios.
Yeah,
and then we should be good. Does that sound good? We still got like 30 minutes to go with like Numbani. I think Numbani is like 30 minutes something, right? So
how many more maps do we have in this?
There's 2 left. There's 9 minute Ilios and then 20-30 minute Numbani or something.
Let's cap it with the Numbani then instead of looking at the Ilios. I think.
Okay.
Even if the Ilios is shorter because we're on a time crunch for this one. So.
Yeah. It's a bit haphazard, but you know, I really enjoyed this podcast so far. I've been having a blast.
This has been super. I think people are really going to enjoy this as well because I think there are a lot of people who got into the Overwatch League around probably like 2019 and maybe even later. And like as much as a lot of eyes were on the early 2018 season, like I think there's going to be a lot of our listeners who probably don't know what it was like back then. So,
and also the nostalgia, of course. I mean,
of course,
I love this kind of nostalgia. It's great.
Customer at 135.41.
135,
41.
I'm
You
ready.
want it?
Yeah.
All right, on go again. I'm going to go to the bathroom straight afterwards. 3, 2, 1, go.
So who actually won on Ilios? I mean, I know that was the
because it's actually no, it's a
Seoul,
4-map
wasn't it?
series. I forgot. Oh god,
I think
it's been so long.
didn't Seoul win?
I think Seoul did win though.
Yeah.
I think they did.
I know we
I
lose
think-
the series.
Yeah, I think you guys lose the series 3-1, though I could be wrong.
I remember losing this series because it was
Sorry,
like
2-1.
Yeah, 2-1. Yeah,
there was-
because it was a draw on this, I think.
Yeah, there's a draw on the final map. It ended on a draw, which is just another incredible callback to early Overwatch, isn't it?
when the 4th map just doesn't matter, but you have to play it anyway because it's for
Yeah.
map score. It was awful.
Well, here it actually mattered, but couldn't get the deal done. But yeah, we'd have those 3-0 series where it was like actually I remember actually talking about that, and I don't think contrary to popular belief, what is the word? Contrary to if a series was decided 3-0, I don't actually think it affected the viewership that much because people just enjoyed like watching Overwatch at the time.
It made almost zero difference. No one
Yeah.
would leave the Blizzard Arena, and barely anyone would leave the stream. In fact, I think that was part
Really?
of the reason. Yeah, I think that was actually part of the reason that that there were so many claims of like shady shit happening on the Overwatch streams, was because people were like, how can they retain all of their viewership when they're in the 4th map? It must be bullshit. They must be view botting the streams. And it's like the Overwatch players are just Overwatch fans just have no idea what they want to watch. They just want to watch
Yeah. And this was the thing to watch as well because there were no streams going on at the same time. Like, you wouldn't have like individual streamer compete with the Overwatch League, and so it didn't make sense to stream during it. And the pro players couldn't stream during the Overwatch League, right? So Overwatch League was the only thing that was on in the category. But going into Numbani, it's actually quite a nice. It's a nice move from Anubis to Numbani because Point A as well is one of those maps where position mattered so much, especially in the early days. Like, you remember those Lunatic High strategies that had like Torbjorn and stuff, and we'd go like, oh my god, they keep holding on the body Point A, because it was positional advantages that they had just figured out before everyone else. And so it wasn't actually down to as much hero compositions or like mechanical skill, just like figuring out Numbani and like Point B high ground, Point A high ground. It was so difficult at the time. Obviously, Dallas Fuel kept it like straight away now with Taimu and Effect doing good work on Tracer and Soldier, but this was another one of those maps that positionally was so hard to figure out at the start.
Am I losing my mind? I haven't seen the default Soldier crosshair in years. Did they change it, or has Blizzard stopped using it or something? I swear I haven't seen.
Sure.
I think they swap. I think they have a general crosshair now. But I'm guessing, but I think they have a general.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen the default one as much either. Like, maybe just no one's played Soldier in the last 3 years.
I don't know. Like, seeing that Soldier crosshair expand as he shot, I was like, I swear I haven't seen this since 2018.
I actually, something as well about these positional advantages and stuff like that, we got to remember Blizzard has done a phenomenal job of adding heroes that solve problems as well. Like, I think Wrecking Ball did a great job of being like, well, we were talking about Winston, how it's like almost impossible to survive. It's like, well, let's make a less impactful but more survivable Winston, and that's what Wrecking Ball solved the problem of. And then they added Ashe. It's like, we need something that has the mid-range of hit scan that's not Widowmaker but also not McCree. So like, I think they've done a great job of like really mixing heroes that allowed you to solve issues with these like high grounds positional advantages. That's why we're also seeing some weird wacky strategies happening here.
The other thing I'm noticing as well, while we're on the topic of Winston's, is that both Miro and xQc, even though they're rated in this game as like some of the best that you would see in the world, their primals are awful. Not in terms of the actual mechanics of their primals, but the timing of them doesn't actually generate value for their team. When you see people play Winston now, one of the ways they get around the fact that Winston is shredded so easily is that you wait until you have a nano or you have a primal in order to make space for the rest of your team. And here they're doing it with a nano boost, but they're never doing it with their primal rage, particularly, where they wait for like them to have a primal, they engage with the primal and make space for the rest of their team. They're normally using it to try and like get kills or what a pulse bomb. They're normally using it to try and get kills or survive at the end of a fight or something.
Did he just use his Diva Bomb?
Yeah, Mickey did.
Yeah,
that's questionable.
That Sunba bomb was legendary, by the way. When xQc was slept on the car and Sunba just lobbed it in. That's a legendary one, by the way.
Has that already happened? Did I miss that?
Yeah, that already happened. Happened in the last fight. Yeah. Do we want to talk about Seoul Dynasty here or anything? Because they were a similar Dallas Fuel situation where they just brought in these star players as well. Like, Sunba was actually not part of Lunatic High prior to Seoul Dynasty. I could be wrong on that. But Munchkin also came in before the season started. Munchkin was like this young prodigy, like superstar hit scam prodigy. At the time, he was playing for. Oh my god, I can't remember what they're called. It was like one of those. It was one of those Korean teams that have like a blue and a red. But I can't remember.
Wasn't Munchkin playing for Cloud9?
Laser Kittens?
Before?
No, it was playing.
Yeah,
with Cloud9
Laser
as well.
Kittens. Yeah,
He was playing for
Laser Kittens.
Oh,
yeah, he was a star prodigy, and people were like, Munchkin, holy shit. Well, I was actually. But then Fleta joined the team from Flash Lux as well. Sunba came in from.
I thought Sunba was playing with them.
I thought Sunba was on Lunatic High.
Yeah, I think he was on Lunatic High as well.
Oh, he joined.
he was. He
maybe
was
like the last year or so, but he wasn't part of that for long. It was like a superstar pickup at the time, like 2017, I think.
Yeah, he got picked up at the end. Apparently, I'm looking at the over.gg page now. He got picked up at the end of 2016, and he played until October 2017.
Well, I completely fucked that up. Sorry, Seoul fans.
But I remember the acquisition of Fleta was the big one. Yeah, because he'd always been on Flash Lux, which was a notoriously bad team. They lost to Fnatic in Apex. That's how bad they were. But Fleta was always that shining star. And I actually remember talking to like Kai and the Envy guys when I was talking to them. They're like, oh yeah, Flash Lux, don't worry about them. They're trash. All you got to do is shut down Fleta because he will literally 1v6 you. If you leave him alone, he will actually kill your whole team. And he's like, he did that multiple times to us in the scrim block. So it was like, Fleta acquisition to Seoul Dynasty was actually so good. And honestly, he was one of the few bright spots of the 2018 season for Seoul Dynasty. Because they did struggle.
There were faker comparisons, I remember, in 2018. Like, people at the time, because like Overwatch League was like big shit now. It was like, oh my god, Overwatch League is big shit now, Overwatch. Who is our faker? Oh, it's Fleta. Fleta is going to be the faker because he's this like emotionless, like kind of robot figure. He popped off on Far, I remember. And like, people were just like, oh my god, he's the faker of Overwatch. And people just went crazy.
I don't think that was why the comparisons were being made, that he was emotional.
No, it was one of them. I remember that was one of them because like people could make like similar comparisons to it. Yeah, he was very like
good.
Yeah, sure, he was good, but like there's still like personality, you know, when you make comparisons between players. You can't just take like a super erratic, like extrovert player and compare him to an introvert. Like when you make like player comparisons, they're of a similar play style, a similar way they're thinking about the game, and similar emotion. Like,
you've also got to remember that was the opinion at the very beginning of the game by some fans and personalities, but that this game was very new, and like people still, it was one of the first introductions to Korean esports for a lot of people that weren't previously into League of Legends. So they still kind of just interpreted all the Korean players as being like robots. Like, if you hadn't followed season Apex, that is like the classic like dismissive view of the Korean superstar players that you would hear parroted a lot back then, that people don't tend to think of now at all, because we're so much more familiar with the Korean players, and you would be if you watched Apex back then as well. But it was these kind of takes were relatively common back then.
I remember.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be condescending here. I'm not trying to be condescending towards Fleta, but that was like the thinking at the time. Like, that was the community sentiment, I feel like, at the time.
Seoul did struggle though. They were a team that was promised. I mean, people were expecting this team to be in the grand finals. And over
I had them top 2. I had Dallas at number 3. I think I had London 1, although maybe I had Seoul 1 and London 2.
A lot of people had London high up in the end because they were just two superstar rosters punted together, right?
Do you remember when there was that segment in 2018 I did where I basically blamed Ryu Jae-hong for a loss? Yeah. And I got death threats.
How did that go over?
On Ilios, I remember, I think.
Yeah. Now, in hindsight, I think when I look back at my understanding of the game in 2018, it was kind of mirrored off of the individualistic kind of play style that the teams had back then, where it was like more like individual hero swaps and individual players popping off. Like, the discipline in the team environment hadn't developed yet. And my understanding of the game was just fucking way far behind that, even further behind. So I was making these accusations, essentially, just blaming Ryu Jae-hong for the loss of the entire map, which at the time I now know is wrong. But fucking hell,
I mean, was it?
Some...
I also, the thing is as well, if it was an early game like this, it is possible that.
Yeah,
like,
it's possible that I was right about it.
I would have to watch the map in order to have an opinion. It is actually possible that that was the case back in these kind of games. Like, I feel like an individual, well, it's more valid than it is now for sure when you look at how they play.
Yeah.
It's actually. Sorry, you go. You finish up.
The point I wanted to make off the back of that, though, is that, like, Seoul Dynasty, this was like an injection of just the Korean culture with the Overwatch League fan base for a lot of people, where their first instance of esports was the Overwatch League. And I remember it. The fan base was fanatic at the time. You had the crossover, that cross-section of K-pop fans online, and then they were like, ooh, this new esports? I've played Overwatch before. The Overwatch League? Oh, what's the Korean team? Seoul Dynasty. And that cross-section. I don't know if you remember those instances just from social media, but it was just manic at times.
Yeah.
I don't really remember it, honestly.
I remember the Seoul, but like I could not, like, I think if it was hard as a Dallas fan with the Western, but Western Overwatch fans are very like reassuring. They're like, don't worry about it. You get them next game, that kind of stuff. The Korean fans of Seoul Dynasty, they were savage to them. Seoul finished 8th. And they lost a lot of games, but you could just see how much of a toll every single loss Seoul Dynasty took on them. They were just, it was so hard. And I actually attribute a lot of their like failures in season 1 to that amount of pressure that they were given. They struggled to grow like the Dallas Fuel, and they struggled to adapt to the ever-growing and the fast-growing metas and stuff like that. And I think Seoul just, a couple of their players didn't live up to expectations. Like Jae-Hong wasn't the dominant force that he was coming into our. Miro really struggled with the changes of how Winston was played throughout the season.
Really struggled,
And Munchkin didn't really live up to the hype, as you said, that he had coming into this season. I think that really just, it was so hard for them. And you have to feel for the guys because they are phenomenal players. I think without that expectations, they could have been a top 4, top 16. But I think all of that combined just makes a failure.
It's a downward spiral as well, because before you had these like tournaments and you had to get a break between every tournament, like you collect your thoughts, like what changes do we need to be made. Overwatch League was this continuous season that went on for months, and you were in a different country, specifically for Seoul Dynasty, right? Like there were Koreans coming to America and they were just staying here for months, like over half a year. And so there's this big continuous, like almost like a 9-to-5 job where you wake up, you play Overwatch all over again in a country you're not familiar with, and like it's so
more
hard
than 9 to 5 as well.
It was awful.
But that's the same level of like what I'm saying, like continuity to it. Like you cannot catch a break to reconsider what you're going through, and it's so hard to snap out of that mentality, unlike the tournaments leading up to the Overwatch League.
I actually want to hit on that as well, because like that was a big factor of why teams that struggled early never recovered, because the season never ended. There was like a week break between each of the stages, right? So the Overwatch League is like, these guys will just take a week off, won't they? No. What you're going to do is you're going to spend that week screwing even harder to make sure you can solve the problems and be ahead. There was never a time in which players were ever really able to leave the arena. And we used to practice in the arena, which was consider like a dungeon almost, because it was just
no windows,
hallway, no windows, white rooms, doors next to doors next to doors next to doors next to doors, and everyone had computers, and you were just expected to be there and work. Like Shanghai Dragons, they went 0-40, but those guys practiced 14 hours a day, 12 hours a day. They had
more than most teams.
Most rigorous schedules out of
we would finish our 12-hour broadcast days for the day, and we walk down that corridor where all the teams' rooms were, and we would hear just the Shanghai Dragons in that room, just shouting,
very regularly,
essentially.
I used to sometimes,
every single night.
I used to go home sometimes at like 1 a.m. because I would finish streaming, because my schedule was sometimes I would just stay there afterwards and stream afterwards after the broadcast days. And so I would go home at like 1 a.m., sometimes 3 a.m., and I would still sometimes see occasionally players like trickling out of the rooms. It was wild. It was insane. But like there was such a fever to improve, and you realize that all of the other teams are improving, and so you don't want to get just left in the dust.
I mean, a ton of people got burned out. There were a lot of like, so when we actually were done with our broadcast as well, and like when we were to walk out of the building, there was this separate exit where like the players would also exit out of. When you would go home, there were a lot of stressed out players taking smoke breaks with like frowns on their faces because they were like burnt out or like they were like discussing a match or something. There was a lot of smoke breaks for some of these players.
With a few fans that have found the back entrance.
They had to stop telling people they can't come back here because just hovering around because like it wasn't a very protected area. But it was like it was a depressing place to be, honestly, in the arena and outside the arena, especially towards the end of the season because it was just so hard. And like we talk about burnout now with travel, like I think because the Overwatch League was new and everyone was getting paid good money now and all that kind of stuff, people endured and they dealt with it. But we have not seen conditions like that ever, and we won't ever again. 40 matches in the short period of time that we have played with everyone stuck with limited breaks was just incredible. And it was impressive to the teams that managed to do it well. And I think a lot of teams learned a lot of lessons.
Yeah.
What do you think about, to take this on a totally different tangent for a moment, what do you think about the compositions that they're running in terms of the thought process with what ults are going to be useful in the fights or like synergies with ultimates? Because I feel like when I look at a lot of these compositions, like for example, the Soldier Tracer or like what the Seoul Dynasty are running now, where they're running Soldier Doomfist and Zumba was on Diva, but now they're swapping over to the Ryan Zarya. Like there's no synergy there with the ults. If you get into a situation where you have ults, what are you trying to do? You're trying to primal for space and then trance to stop them doing something. You have no ults to create win conditions for your team. But at the same time, I think generally speaking, the comps that win the neutral fights are the better comps. But
because so much of it is, I think the Mercy, the Mercy insta-res just negates ultimates. You can use an ultimate to get a pick. And that one ability that you can use twice in a row can just negate multiple ultimates. So what we're seeing is a much more individualistic style of the game that you're not really going to see ever again, I think. It's so much like comfort picks almost as well from a lot of these players that we've seen over the course of watching this series.
It is really weird as well, because if you try and take space away from your opponents and you get a pick, the Mercy can literally fly to your backlines and res before you can punish her. It feels like you need some CC to be able to deal with it. But obviously, there's no Brig in the backlines to be able to actually do that. And like, what, you're just going to run a McCree the entire time? I suppose you could to try and punish the Mercy a little bit, but I don't know whether those were game at this viable.
Sleep Dart.
I guess, yes, Sleep and Doomfist, I suppose, is some CC as well. Yes, Sombra. I am surprised that Sombra wasn't played more, but I assume that it wasn't really effective to hack the Mercy because she flew around too fast or something.
Why do I feel like it's not in the state that we think it was in? Was it a longer hack time? I think it might have been a longer hack time. Yeah,
and
I think
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like you built up ultimates so quickly in this that they would have Valkyrie almost every other fight.
It feels like Sombra should be ridiculously good in this meta.
Wait, I don't think she had permanent invisibility at this point. When did that come in? Actually, now that I'm thinking about it.
That's a good point.
Permanent invisibility? Sombra didn't always have permanent invisibility.
No, it used to be...
So. It used to be like 14 seconds or something.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because I remember they used to be I had to learn Sombra for that period of time where Flex Support had to learn how to play Sombra because people was using like hacking the packs and getting ult charged that way. And you had to have routes, right? You had to know how long your invisibility was and how you would get somewhere. So that's crazy. It might have been fixed before this, but I cannot 100% remember. So I'm trying to work out why Sombra wasn't as prominent here because I feel like Sombra would be good in these metas. But it just doesn't.
Is it just the discipline? Like they've been playing these comps for so long. It was
look at that on xQc. Look at that. Yeah. They click on the Rhine. They pushed forwards, and suddenly there's a Rhine in their back lines. Like what? What? It's like a deliberate pincer that you can set up by feeding your tank into them. It's bananas.
I think it's the discipline, right? It's the fact that the teams weren't. They weren't trained. They weren't on the team play aspects, and so like characters like Sombra, which do require a high level of teamwork to try and get value out of. The teams just hadn't been playing in that way. They haven't been thinking about that state. Like when you're in this meta, it's so individualistic. Like you're looking at the tanks inting into the backline. People are playing Tracer trying to get these solo pulse bombs off. They're taking 1v1s in random directions. Sometimes a McCree just decides to go for a hike just on the left side of the map. I mean, it's all over the place.
But honestly, that's how the game is played these days, which is interesting because I think the game is played more that way. I think it's weird that they're playing this individual style that you're talking about, but while also trying to team fight. It feels like they're playing this dive, but also not utilizing the flanks as much as people do it these days.
Yeah.
Especially with characters like Wrecking Ball, Tracer, Echo, like those characters seem to, and Ash, like they seem to flank a lot more. Feels like they're just, as you said, playing individual styles, but just running their heads in against each other and just hoping that their reses are more valuable and that the flanking Reinhardt's going to get more value.
Maybe the reason I say that is because in modern day Overwatch, I think people are a lot better at punishing people if they overextend for a second, and you get these small opportunities.
There's more awareness going on currently, and that's certainly a big difference as well. Like we've seen so many plays here where like a Widowmaker just pops out and they're like, oh, they have a Widowmaker. It's like just a 3K or whatever, because they just don't expect it from a certain angle. I think there's way more awareness going on now in current Overwatch, and harder to go for those plays because of it.
I don't know, that guy walking in the background slowly backwards just got me giggling. He's just got the cameraman's just got jeans and a top on and is just walking backwards behind the players. It's funny.
Can we take a moment to appreciate the Blizzard Arena? The Blizzard Arena was so good. From a player's standpoint, from a fan standpoint, it was actually such a good thing having like having a centralized arena that had all the utilities that it did. It just made the event so special. And I think
the screen was amazing as well.
Yeah,
I mean,
incredible.
it was incredible.
Yeah.
Then I threw an orange at it. Almost got fired.
You threw an orange at the screen?
Oh, yeah.
I did.
2019.
That was a segment, yeah.
Producers were very angry about that one. That's $1,000 screen.
Oh, mate, I was like a $10,000 screen.
Orange at it.
Yeah, I just fucking launched an orange at it, and it flickered for a second as well. It turned off. I remember distinctly. Yeah.
Christ. Yeah. So I wanted to pose this question. We're coming to the end of this map, and I want to pose this question to you all. If one of the current teams from the Overwatch League in 2020 was ported into this Overwatch League right now, like right at the beginning of January, and they had all the advantages of the knowledge of the game, all of that kind of stuff, what's the lowest ranking team that you think would be able to comfortably beat Dallas and Seoul?
Wait,
and we're not saying so.
You posed. So how do you?
Okay.
Yeah, what do you mean?
So what I'm saying is, what is the lowest ranking team from Overwatch League 2020 that you would say could comfortably beat these two teams, the Dallasville and Seoul Dynasty? If you had a time machine and you took them, the 2020 team from right at the end of the season, and you played them against those teams right when this match is happening. So what I'm saying is,
I would say Boston.
Team from,
like, what?
Yeah, Boston. Boston would beat. I think Boston would beat London Spitfire. Yeah.
I think the
you think
lowest
Boston
level.
would beat London Spitfire at the end of the 2018 season?
Okay, that's
because I think that's a hot take.
I'm saying London Spitfire during I think during the regular season, I think London Spitfire hit like a new level. Same with Philadelphia Fusion at the very end of the season. But I think Boston would have won the regular season of the Overwatch League if they had it like 2020 Boston Uprising at the very end of 2020 season. I think would win the Overwatch League. You underestimate how good players have been. Do you remember when like Sire Player got like a 30% critical hit accuracy against the Dallas Fuel in a match, and everyone was like, "This is like cheating." These days, if you're a Widowmaker player and you don't have 30% critical hit accuracy, you're not really playing the game properly. Like the levels that I think individual players have gone to, and like think about traces. Think about what traces do these days. It's incredible. I think it's just I think you'd be surprised.
The bar has been raised, and then it's the knowledge on top of that. I mean, it's just whatever team I think you consider to be the worst in 2020, I would say that they would win 2018.
That is. I'm not sure that I agree with that, because I think that New York from 2020, as we got like later and later through the seasons, actually became a pretty decent team. Like what we were talking about at the beginning of this one, where we were saying
New York in 2018.
Yes, New York of 2018. The astronomical improvement from the teams, like 6 months in, the teams were really good. So
maybe Boston winning 2018 is a bit of a.
I mean, I think Boston could beat all of the teams at the beginning of the league, like right now.
Absolutely,
I think that is valid.
Beating London, I don't know about either.
Yeah,
because they were really good at like Hanzo, Widowmaker, and stuff, which is like, do you trust Jerry and Color Hex to beat those guys?
Also, the concepts that we take for granted, or not take for granted, but we just assume a default on a lot of these teams. which is just they were all on a very similar page in terms of their game plan. Their composition had a purpose. Like it was at the end of 2018.
But that's the same for New York throughout the regular season too. That's one of my reasons there that I think that maybe they wouldn't be as vulnerable as we think. Because remember, this is like the worst the Overwatch League ever was in terms of performance. It only went up and astronomically from here throughout.
Yeah, it really did.
But I would also understand if like a coach came out of the woodwork and just tweeted at us like, "You guys are morons." Like, of course, Boston would beat London Spitfire in the finals. Yeah. Like, I could kind of see how some people would think that way. I don't think there's like a clear-cut answer, but
I don't know how good the finals were.
I literally haven't watched the finals in years.
See, I think I would lean more towards that. I think Boston would win the grand finals. I think like I can understand your points and like maybe that London was at the peak, but I think the amount players have improved over the last few years, not just individually, but on like a teamwork and team understanding and synergy, I think they might just dwarf over it, and we just don't realize how bad we were. Like maybe you'd have to look back at the 2018 finals. Like maybe they do play like this still, and we just don't remember it. We're like rose-colored glasses, and it actually wasn't as good as we all remember it.
Yeah. Do you think that invalidates every argument for like GOAT status for players that were good at this period of time? Like, should it even be counted?
No, I mean, it's the same with like Hall of Fame in basketball. Like people face different challenges and like they have different skill sets because the games are in different states, right? Like if someone figures, there's Bren and Josh, look at that. Wow.
Take this off. I do not want to listen to this.
To just sum it up, I just want to say, like, as we mentioned already, with the positional advantages on like Anubis and Numbani, like it's different challenges to the players that players face currently in the current Overwatch space, right? So, you know, it's different skill sets, but different challenges and different achievements. Like it's got to be relative to the current gameplay.
God, I was at my peak back then. And Bren had barely formed. He was.
Mate, I was at the rock bottom. I feel like in terms of my knowledge, cadence, broadcast presence, everything at the start of that year. It was
also a bit of a throwback. Was also the smug emote in the back from Moon Moon when Moon Moon was consistent Overwatch streamer. I love that emote. That was like the shit. That was like the go-to emote in Overwatch the directory.
Win for the Fran in 2018.
It's Kurt here.
Wow. How much hair I had.
Oh. God, I don't want to watch it. I don't want to watch this.
There it is.
I really don't want to watch it. We're just mainly asking Josh questions.
Yeah. This was fun.
It was. I enjoyed this.
Yeah. I think this was a really good content. Oh, for fuck's sake.
There it is.
There it is.
You look so different. You look so young.
So different.
Yeah.
And it's crazy. I forgot you looked like that at all.
Look at the arms. Look at the arms.
Yeah, I know. I was 21 at this point, I think.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
I want to go back and watch some of Reinforce's old games, like
yeah.
I'm talking like winning the Atlantic Showdown.
No, can we go back and watch him lose to Envy and Apex after choosing him? That seems like a good.
Why that one? Oh my lord.
Well,
I'm not gonna be able to work for the Overwatch League. No. Like actually, like John Spector's gonna watch that episode and be like, "Why are we hiring this guy?" Like, his reputation is completely demolished. Like back to production, you go.
We've already done it for Custa. Now we need to do it for you. It's only.
I only played one on the map, and that was the map we won. So that was great.
We didn't blame Custa for anything. We just said, "Oh, Dallas Fuel was a dumpster fire. Not his fault." You know, it is what it is.
How about this? This is something we can all agree on. We'll go back and watch some LG Evil and watch a Vast. That sounds.
Yeah.
There's no footage of him on Boston, is there? So we can't go back and watch Boston games. We have to go back and watch the LG Evil.
Yeah.
Okay. I think a better idea is that we end this episode. Thanks for watching, first of all. But also write a comment of what episode you want to see us do next. This might become like a regular side content series as well on the channel, because we are planning on increasing the amount of content we pump out onto both the Plat Chat Overwatch channel and the Plat Chat Valorant channel. So, you guys will have to keep an ear out. Write a comment. What game do you want us to review next? I hope you enjoyed this little blast of the past. We got to review some of that old gameplay. I think this was quite good. Honestly, it turned out better than I was expecting. So
it was fun.
Yeah. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.